The Combat Achievement Diary, a testament to a player's problem-solving, spatial reasoning, and overall skill in old school RuneScape. My goal is to complete the diary in the lowest in-game time. This is the Helm any percent speedrun, starring GM to GMs. Slayer. The most popular skill in old school RuneScape, and in some cases, one of the grindiest to train. Previously we gained access to the weapon that will streamline a lot of this grind, the Crystal Halberd. But we're only 80 Slayer, and the combat achievements include the Alchemical Hydra, which hard requires 95 Slayer. We're only about 25% of the way there. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but we've also put a lot of work into making this grind as optimized as possible. Recall back to episode 3, where I mentioned how various quests will not be completed until the end of the Slayer grind. Let's take a moment to go over why that was so important. Pause as needed, since this is going to be a ton of information I'm laying out. Each Slayer Master in the game has their own pool of monsters they can assign as Slayer tasks, alongside their own chance of being assigned. Higher weighting means a higher chance of being assigned. For the rest of the series, we will be using Steve as our Slayer Master. I don't have access to the Karamja Gloves 3 or 4, and traveling to Duradel without them takes over a minute to do. Steve, on the other hand, is right next to a teleport spot that we unlocked in episode 4. Additionally, Steve's task weighting benefits us more, and the amount of mobs he assigns is lower for bad tasks, and the same for extended tasks, so picking this master was a no-brainer. At 80 Slayer, the total weight number for Steve's task list is 113. For example's case, TzTok-Jad have a weight of 10, so disregarding a previous Slayer assignment, Steve has a 10 in 113 chance to assign TzTok-Jad. Now let's look at how I categorize tasks. We have good, bad, okay, and whatever. Good tasks include things like Dust Devils and Blood Vels, tasks that yield good Slayer experience per hour. Bad tasks are ones that usually involve special weapons, such as Korasks and Toroth, and they yield bad experience per hour. We will always skip these tasks when assigned. Okay tasks include mobs such as Hellhounds, Greater Demons, and Trolls. While not giving great Slayer experience, they aren't the worst thing to be assigned, so if we're affluent in Slayer points, we'll skip them. Otherwise, we take it on the chin. Lastly, the whatever tasks are just Mutated Zygomites and Dark Beasts. They're relatively quick and worth the time just to bank some extra Slayer points. With all that in mind, let's talk about what my questing restrictions have done for us. Displayed on screen is the odds of getting each category of Slayer task at certain Slayer level thresholds. So as it stands, I currently have a 54.9% chance of getting a Slayer task that I desire. Again, take a second to pause the video if you desire, just to take in the numbers on screen, because what I show next might blow your mind. This is what our odds look like with our current quest log, but if we were to calculate this with all the tasks unlocked by completing quests such as Dragon Slayers 1 and 2, Cabin Fever, Beneath Cursed Sands, and etc., they look something like this. Our odds of a desirable task drop from that aforementioned 54.9% to a staggering 36.7%. Additionally, there's a 33.1% chance that the task I receive is one of those quest lock monsters. While it goes against the spirit of normal account progression to not unlock Barrow's Gloves, an iconic milestone in a RuneScape journey, it benefits us much more to go on without the gloves and camp the task manipulating bracelets. Now with all those numbers out the way, it's time to grind out one of the longest grinds, and one of the last grinds this account will have to endure. Let's unlock all Slayer monsters without ever equipping Barrow's Gloves. First things first though, my Magic Cape slot leaves much to be desired and could use an upgrade. While the Mage Arena 2 cape isn't necessarily required, it does passively save time the longer I use it. I recently hit 80 magic, which gives me access to the charge spell, making the boss kills take significantly less time. But before we can do Mage Arena 2, we need to cast all the god spells 100 times. While doing this, I ran into my buddy Eliab, doing some innocent skull tricking, but he egoed me, so the quality of my day diminished slightly. Now if you didn't know, all 3 of the god spells can actually be autocasted with their respective variants of the Staff of the Dead. Additionally, you can gain the credit for the 100 casts by just simply splashing, which is why I'm wearing your typical Rat Splasher gear. After a few minutes, the 100 casts were finished, and we can now take on the Mage Arena 2 bosses. There's a good chance that one inventory of supplies won't last us for the 3 bosses, so we brought the summoning familiar called Pack Yak to harbor 28 potions for us. Now here we introduce the first mistake of the episode. If you can see in my chat box, I forgore to cast Charge while still in Mage Training Arena, so I can't use it for the Wilderness bosses. It's not a huge deal, it's just going to cost us about a minute. That's the first boss down, second boss, and third boss finished. Kinda shocked I didn't run into a single PKer while doing this, considering the Wilderness boss rework just happened. Maybe they were just all at Vedion or something. Good thing we knocked those out 2 episodes ago. With all gear acquired, it's now full steam ahead on the Slayer grind. Now let's talk about how we do each task. First off is TzTok-Jad. If we're not taking on a boss, we do the very fun log-out Slayer method. 3 Chally specs, and barrage the remainders. A cold one tags them all, while my med level casts heal other, so he doesn't need to break formation to get food. Dust Devils also follow the same rules. More log-out Slayer fun, but without a cold one taking a ton of damage. Bloodvelds we make use of the Venator Bow in the Meyerditch Laboratories, alongside a cannon with the Din's Bulwark specs. Abyssal Demons, which we unlock later, we use 4 Dancers in the middle, with Cold One rounding them all up. Necroals are done pretty much the same way as Dust and TzTok-Jad, but without logging out, as it's somehow slower to do logout method here. Dagonoths are done in the Lighthouse with a cannon, and the Din's Bulwark to special attack with. Ankus are identicals to Dust Devils and TzTok-Jad, log out, log in, spec, repeat. Calfights are done in the Slayer only dungeon, with the cannon and Din's special attack. Sukwas are done with more of the same, cannon and Dins. Trolls are done in Jatizo, again, cannon and Dins. Greater Demons are done in Mount Carulum because of experience delegation, and it's almost identical to Chasm of Fire. Hellhounds and Aberrant Spectres are done in Neve's Dungeon, Gargolons in the one place they can be found, and the same goes for Zygomites and Dark Beasts when we unlock them. Lastly, I said at the start of the series that there are no restrictions, so during my live streams, if my viewers weren't busy, they'd come beeline special attack transfer to our future Grandmaster to help speed up the grind, and further streamline our melee experience gains, since the majority of that is being gained through just special attacks. Now let's get slaying. A nice tip for anyone who does their Bloodveld tasks in the labs: ignore what the Runelight Cannon plugin tells you, and place your cannon 1 tile west. There's this one Bloodveld that gets stuck behind the southwest table, and in the Runelight Cannon spot, it will not get hit, and just stay there forever. But if you place it here, the cannon will have line of sight, and you will passively kill that 7th Bloodveld. Our Slayer task came and went, and eventually we found ourselves at 85 Slayer. One thing I never really touched on was my block list. Since I've got above 200 quest points, we unlock 4 slots with which to block tasks. During the Wilderness grind, I only had Black Demons and Fire Giants, and with the rest of the grind, I've added Worms and Drakes. On our first Demons task, we got our first Abyssal Whip drop, which has dropped dramatically in price. Many tasks later, we found ourselves at 80 attack, and we got donated 2 new toys from the Infinite Money Source.
89, 86.
Ah, TzTok-Jad. The best words in old school RuneScape. I think I will take on Jad today. Remember what I said last episode, we need 5 KC at both the Volcano bosses, and I'm very close to meeting the requirements for a specific challenge. Meet No Time for a Drink. Notoriously, one of the most obnoxious challenges in the combat achievements. You cannot lose a single prayer point throughout the run. And if you're familiar with the caves, these little bats drain your prayer by 1 every time they attack you. So normally this would involve constantly kiting around the arena while flicking prayers. But instead, I have something else in mind. We enter with magic instead, and just use Ice Barrage on every bat while hanging out in the northeast of the arena. And with Tumek and Shadow, the higher level monsters won't last long. And there's 85 magic. Now we can equip the staff. Now doing this with range is objectively faster. However, it is riskier, and I'd rather get every task done in one shot, as to not waste time meaninglessly. That's why I've opted for the magic route. And look at that, Shadow doing what it does best. After about 45 minutes, it was time for Jad, and that poor creature did not last long at all. That gives us 3 new combat tasks: denying the healers, you didn't say anything about a bat, and no time for a drink. Another TzTok-Jad task, you say? So let's take on Zook again. The Inferno Speedrun task. It's less daunting than it appears. In fact, it's much easier given today's metas of Thralls, Lightbearer, and Death Charge. Unfortunately, those runs can often end in death, since wave 50 and above, you are at the mercy of Jal Zil, who can max a 46. And since you're on the Arceus spellbook, that means no Blood Barrage to guarantee that you're above that at the start of every wave. 99 defense and RNG is already unreliable, and on top of that I'm only 80 defense, and that's not going to change for the rest of the series, but more on that another time. As much as I'd love to break my current PB of barely sub 55, which was set before the release of A Kingdom Divided, I'm taking in the Ancient Spellbook for this. One other thing I forgot to mention, my magic level is still 86, so I need to waste an inventory spot for the Saturated Heart just to cast Ice and Blood Barrage in the first place. Pace into 35 is looking a bit slow, but it's good enough to keep it under 65 minutes. Much like all my runs prior, I've been passively trying to keep all 3 pillars alive without losing a run, and this time, it worked. That's the Jads down, and we have 9 minutes to take on TzTok, more than enough time. For those who have watched Inferno speedruns before, you'll see almost all runners tag the Mage once, and leave it up alongside Jad and the healers to save time. Keeping the Mage up saves about 12 to 18 seconds, and leaving the healers up saves even more. But skipping healers is incredibly risky if you're trying to guarantee a KC, since if your Twist-a-Bow turns into a ramen noodle, you're not going to make it to the end. And with light work, that's the sub 65 completed, earning us 3 tasks. Inferno Speedrunner, Jad, what are you doing here? And Nibblers, be gone, since we managed to keep our pillars alive. 3 KC down, 2 to go. Ah, Tazar. Back to Jad for this one. Let's play a game. It's called What Did Cold One Forget? I'll give you a few seconds. Time's up. It's the Saturated Heart. I took Lunars for this run to use Vengeance, and my brain fails to disappoint at disappointing me yet again. Remember how I mentioned I'm only 86 magic? Yeah, I need Heart Revenge too, so I've geared for my sub 2630 attempt, and I've no access to my spellbook, so let's see how this turns out. Pace into Major seems fine, let's hope this holds up. Looking okay on wave 46. And coming up on the end here, time looks fine thankfully, looks like we didn't need magic after all. And that's almost a minute faster than what we needed. That's Fight Cave Speedrunner completed. Ah, Tazar again. This time, we bring in the Saturated Heart. Now keep in mind, I only have 2 tasks left in the Fight Caves. One that is just an arbitrary 5 kill count check, and the other, which is melee only. I'm intentionally holding the melee only until I can equip a Scythe, which requires both 80 attack and 90 strength. That's 4th KC completed, and somehow 3 seconds slower than my no Venge run. What we're witnessing here is a sad day. Ever since 75 attack, I've been exclusively training attack with Din's Bulwark special attacks, and today, that comes to an end. That is 82 attack, and we no longer need to train it. I'm intentionally locking my attack to 82, and my defense to 80, and there is a good reason why. There may be some of you watching who already know the exact reason because I've discussed this on my livestream a few times. But to those who don't know the exact reason, please leave a comment below guessing why I'm locking my combat stats here. I'm curious to see how many can actually get this right. Now with the Bulwark out of the picture, some of my Slayer tasks will yield slightly lower Slayer experience per hour. One of them being Bloodvelds, which I do at the labs with the Venator Bow, since his experience rates are almost identical to Logout Slayer, but with Din's out the picture, it was worth checking how my rates compared now. Turns out the labs are slightly faster, and more consistent. While I am using chins here, my range experience per hour is about the same as it would be at labs. And keep in mind, a lot of range experience is coming from the cannon, which gives experience equal to twice your damage dealt. Chins are doing 4 times your damage dealt, and still only matching it. No one is a fan of Logout Slayer, and if it is not benefiting me, I refuse to do it. So, back to the labs we go. While we're touching on methods of Slayer, for those of you who watch the Maxscape Speedrun series, you'll know there's a method involving using both rooms at Necryals. By the time I found out about this, I'd already delegated my combat experience to certain tasks. Additionally, I'm using the Crystal Halberd special attack for this task, and it is infinitely more annoying to set up consistently for double room. So, we stay as a single room Andy. Hey, you see that? Right there? That's your YouTuber forgetting to press record right before a big level. 91 Slayer. That marks the start of something great. We now have access to every Slayer boss, aside from Thermi and Hydra, and our combat stats are right about where we want them to be, with the exception of strength being just short of 90. The in-game time after today's events is at 7 days and 16 hours, but from here on out, the in-game time will be hidden until the end of the series. If this video gets 5,000 likes, I will consider showing it on the next episode. Thank you for watching today, and before we go, a word from today's video sponsor, Skill Specs.
You guys should subscribe to Cold One's channel because he's such a handsome man. He's very good looking, makes the best content. Send me a couple on Snapchat a couple times, bro. I can really vouch for his size. What else do you want me to say, dude? He's just a great all-rounder, man. He's hung like a horse.